Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Hi again.
Hey there.
So today I want to talk about jealousy. You like jealousy and
I do. Juicy
survival fear.
jealousy.
Yep. I want to talk about the fear that can come along with it that is built in.
How I am typically hearing this talked about these days is jealousy as attachment panic.
Panic. Okay.
Attachment
panic.
Yeah. So yeah, great topic. And, jealousy is for me a conversation that should be circumambulated. We should think of jealousy as a thing that we walk around and we get different views of. And I believe that if we talk about jealousy in this way that allows it to be multiple things, we get a better sense of how not only do we experience jealousy differently in different relationships, in different contexts, but also how different jealousy can be for our partners, for our friends. So frequently I hear people be reductive about jealousy, and I don't think they mean to. It's just that there's this desire to put some limits and put some boundaries on things that are scary, and jealousy can be scary. And so I hear people say things like, jealousy is just insecurity. So just be more secure in yourself and you won't feel jealousy. Or
First of all, yeah. How to be a millionaire. First, get $1 million.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if we're not going to do a Steve Martin skit, instead, I just like thinking about jealousy in this multiplicity framework, because it actually helps me show up for people who experience jealousy differently, including people who experience very low jealousy. I experience quite a lot of jealousy. You experience less jealousy on the whole than I do. It lets me show up to you as you are, as you experience it, which is to say, I can be with your actual human experience of jealousy.
Rather than trying to map yours onto mine and then interact with me that way. Yeah.
Right. Or be reductionist or frightened of jealousy just as a concept, and then possibly miss the opportunity to connect with you. Because I think jealousy is an opportunity for more intimacy with our closest people, not just our intimate partners, but our close friendships, our family. Jealousy is a window into where we are frightened that we will have a rupture, a break, a threat to our valued relationships.
Right. And so this attachment panic are you saying that that's one of the many facets of jealousy? Because what I heard you say is, so it's a response to a threat. Well, panic is one kind of response to a threat. And certainly, I do that.
Yeah.
But an attachment panic, the panic of a threat to an attachment.
Yeah. So if we go back to attachment theory, you and I did an episode on attachment theory where we talked about how, attachment styles, that phrase tends to leave us thinking that we have a style that's fixed, but that a better way to talk about attachment might be to think about our strategies and our tendencies. And when I'm thinking about jealousy, well, I define jealousy as a worry or fear that a valued relationship is under threat by a third party, whether that third party is real or imagined. So that when I experience that, if my attachment strategies, if I have an attachment-based connection to this valued other, where I see them as a source of my safe haven and my secure base, if I see them as creating the context for me to feel secure, then when I feel that jealousy, that fear that connection will be interrupted, depending on which strategy I use, right? Whether I tend to go into an anxious mode or an avoidant mode is going to have a lot to do with what plays out next, like the actions. And so I do, in some ways, I dislike the phrase attachment panic because it can it can it can be just a cover for not wanting to use the word jealousy, and it's okay
Oh,
to use the word jealousy. So I
yeah, it's a feeling. It's like
it's a
anger
feeling.
or whatever.
Right. So I don't like
It's not a reflection on the person feeling it.
there is no moral value to feeling no jealousy. It's what you do. Your behavior, we could decide whether we're going to judge your behavior when you're jealous as potentially being harmful or not. But the feeling itself is simply a feeling. And so I don't like when people use the term attachment panic to as a way to cover up or avoid having to admit that they're feeling jealous. However, sometimes it feels like a more accurate representation of what's going on. So jealousy can be mired in shame and guilt for many of us. If we were taught, for instance, that envy is one of the seven deadly sins, and then we conflate envy and
Oh,
jealousy, now
yeah.
I can be in some real trouble where I'm like, no, I can't really own this emotion yet. I haven't unpacked it enough. So I would rather we use any term to get us to a spot where we're talking about what's going on. What do we talk about when we don't talk about being jealous? Maybe that's the next thing I should write. I One of the things we talk about is our attachment panic, and so let's go back to those attachment strategies. You have had a tendency to use strategies of avoidance. I have had a tendency to use strategies of anxiety and anxiousness. And that's not to say that we don't both use the other strategies, but those are our tendencies. And so in our life, in our romantic life, it's very easy for me to look back over my history with you and see times when I responded to you showing interest in someone else or receiving affection from someone else that I that landed in my body as a survival threat. I went into a survival level threat, and my response to that was, oh, holy shit. I go into fight and fawn. Of the survival threat mechanisms, the responses, I would go into fight, either fight off this other person or fight with you. Such an interesting strategy,
Yeah, right?
not uncommon. Like, I want more of your attention. I'm afraid that it's going to be threatened, so I'm going to fight with you. I'm not totally sure that human evolution has been real,
Well
like,
thought
it feels
out.
like a T-Rex plan, like, this was not well thought out.
Yep.
Um, but we do. The other thing we do is I do, is fawn. I attempt to please you, to move into fawning behaviors that subvert my own actual needs, wants, desires, boundaries. Um, would you say and I don't know, would you say that, coming from more avoidant strategies, do you tend to use more freeze and flight responses? Is that your unconscious strategy habit?
I actually wouldn't. I don't see it in my avoidance strategies. I actually see fawning, um, but it's kind of doing an end run around the actual issue. I
Mhm.
fawn. I mean, you're familiar with the kind of wheedling, saccharine behaviors that don't directly address the issue, and I think that's kind of how it feels avoidant to me. Is I don't say, "Oh, I feel a threat. Let me see what I can do to influence the context of that threat." No, I just kind of go sideways and pull at you or something like that. And the other one is fight, but it's
Interesting.
the internal fight. So
Oh,
you were talking about fighting with me. Yeah, I do too. I get all that negative internal self-talk that leaves me present but um not very practically functional because I'm getting in my own way with my internal um, judgments and meanness and stuff like that. All those nasty internal voices.
so we don't talk about this a ton on the podcast, but when we're talking about our threat responses, one of my favorite things that we learned when we were studying with Elizabeth Kristoff in neurosomatic intelligence was to the reframe of our inner critic as a fight response turned inward. Like, oh,
That landed so well for me because it's
'Cause you don't fight externally very much,
No, I don't.
but you can be
But
cruel
since
inside of
mhm,
yourself.
and since I heard that, I've
I do
started to
both.
notice
I'm
how
an overachiever.
overachiever, how, how much more I have a fight response than I thought I did.
Mm,
It's just turned inward.
yeah. So, I have seen clients struggle with their threat response when jealousy comes up. If they tend to go into freeze, um, this can be particularly challenging because they may appear to their partner to be fine, but inside they are in full panic mode. They're in fact heading toward dorsal vagal flop. They're really in, especially if they get stuck in a freeze response. And so learning ways to work with that can be really important, including a nonverbal safe word for like, oh, I can't even verbalize. If you don't currently have a nonverbal safe word, especially one that you can use outside of the bedroom, I strongly recommend putting one in place. We use the double tap because you are martial arts trained, but I have
And
also
it's built in
used,
now. Yep.
yeah, but I've also used hand signals
Yeah.
with people. I had one partner who really didn't totally understand what I was saying, but if I closed up like this and I just like did like he could get it. He understood what this meant. That like it conveyed to him like I'm closed, I'm frozen, and it was all I could do.
Yeah. And since we're on the topic, it is helpful to talk about it ahead of time so
Mm.
that you're not having to do the work of interpreting what you're seeing. If you can be clear ahead of time with the words, with the nonverbal stuff, say this is what I will do. Then when I see that, I will know what you're doing. Very helpful.
It's when we're talking about jealousy, we're talking about something that brings us often into a space where we no longer behave like ourselves. We are what a Jungian analyst might call constellated. And so it is helpful to have put in place some shortcuts, some ways to short
Shortcuts. That's
circuit.
a good word. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Because I may have a very narrow window before that panic takes over. And that narrow window of time between when I am recognizing the sensations of jealousy in my body. So for me, I tend to feel prickles behind my ears. I feel heat rising in my chest. A lot of people describe like knots in their stomach and their fists are clenching or their throat is closing.
I more or less burst into flame. My whole body just goes
Oh,
up like
you
10
do.
degrees.
Yeah, you get literally
Yeah.
physically hot. Yeah, you
Yeah.
run a fever. Um, when the window of time between those somatic sensations appearing and your communication of what this means. So you have to experience the sensations, label them as jealousy, right? Recognize them, interpret them as jealousy, and then help someone else understand, like, oh, my partner's experiencing a big emotion. This is why it's helpful in our household to have these nonverbal and verbal safe words because like I'm apt to have less than 30 seconds
Right. So it
before
saves
I
time.
get yeah,
Mhm.
before I get into a spot where I might be, nonverbal, which, you know, let me be clear, that it's not because you need to fix my jealousy, but sometimes all I need is some reassurance, but I have a pretty strongly disorganized attachment system, like, that's my what I grew up with, and I have earned secure attachment with you, but sometimes I still get triggered
Sure.
into
Yeah.
these constellated into these, like, really deep states of wounding. So
Yeah.
having these shortcuts is really helpful,
Yeah.
and I don't feel bad for using them,
Not at
but I
all. No, I think uh, they they save time, which allows the whole situation to move along faster. And I think it's important to note that, as you mentioned, this isn't about trying to fix the jealousy. We're not talking about, at least I'm not talking about taking actions or doing things that are designed to change the thing that the jealousy was based on. This is just about dealing with the moment of experiencing the jealousy. I'm not it's like, oh, I see that you feel jealous. I will stop doing that thing. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about, oh, you're having a feeling right now. How can I help you work with it?
So let's contextualize this in the jealousy roadmap.
Yeah.
So the jealousy roadmap is the 5 steps that were very, very apparent in my qualitative research, where people who were dealing with jealousy successfully moved through these steps, right? And the steps are: notice the sensations in their body, be able to name their jealousy and understand that it is jealousy and the host of feelings the jealousy had brought with it. Then unpacking the narrative, dealing with the narrative of the jealousy, navigating needs, and then nurturing compersion. And what I hear you saying is, in this episode, we're focused on the survival fear, the threats that come up, which means we're talking about primarily the first 2 steps. How do I notice that the jealousy is present, and how do I name it? And then maybe a little bit of step 3 of unpacking, like, what does this mean for me? What do I think it means about who I am as a person, or how
What's the
safe this
story I'm
relationship?
telling myself about what's happening right now?
Yeah, and all of that, all those 3 steps, those are the ones people tend to skip, and people tend to go right to step 4, which is navigating needs. That's where we renegotiate our relationship. We ask for exactly what we need in the situation. We make sure we have clear boundaries. We go sit with our therapist and we work through our relationship agreements, all the things.
A lot of those things are really hard when you're in the midst of a survival level fear
Right, or actually impossible. So
or
I have
impossible.
people show up to me saying, "Help me figure out how to have agreements that will stop my jealousy." I'm like, "Ooh, but we can't actually skip over those first 3 steps." So if we're going to deal effectively with jealousy as a survival fear reaction, then we have to take seriously the fact that this is um this is going to happen, and we're going to be in a learning process, like learning, how does jealousy show up for me? How does it arrive on the scene? Yes, I might want to know a little bit about what inspires it in me, but mostly, how does it show up in my body?
Mhm.
What do I
Right.
do? And then what meaning do I make out of it?
What
And
are the
that leads
traumatic experiences you have, and then what are your stories about those
right.
experiences?
And when we get to the story piece, that can lead us into a whole conversation about archetypal jealousy and how I might have the kind of jealousy like Hera had, that was a very angry, punitive, violent jealousy, very possessive. Or I might have the kind of jealousy more like Hephaestus, where he's like despondent and hopeless when he catches Aphrodite, when he's married to Aphrodite and he catches Aphrodite in bed with Ares, and he's just despondent, and he just kind of like gives up, and he's like, I trap them under a gold net, but he's not. It's sad, and it's like maudlin, and like yeah, like an inner critic. It's angry, but it's turned inward more than outward. And these aren't good or bad. But the reason I bring that up is when we're working through these first 3 steps of the jealousy roadmap, there's an opportunity to do this work even if your partner or partners aren't available to help. Now, I would wish for you all to have partners who are on board to collaborate on doing the jealousy work, but it's your emotion. You don't have to wait for anybody else. And if they are not equipped to deal with this, or they just don't want to, I don't want anybody feeling like, oh, I can't deal with my jealousy till my partner does X, Y, and Z. You aren't actually trapped. This is inner work more than anything.
So one of the things that I think about that, so the first step of naming, um, is in my experience, okay, something's happening. I'm having physical sensations, physical
You're noticing.
experiences.
You're
Oh,
noticing
noticing.
those.
Sorry,
Yep.
right. I skipped a step. That's the noticing, and the step between there and naming is involves the imagination.
It
I I
does.
I
Interpretation. Remember our
interpretation.
NSI training, right?
Yep.
I get input, and the input is raw,
Yeah.
right? The
It's
raw
just data,
data comes in, and I don't yet have a meaning to make out of it, but then I do.
and then
Then
I
I
do. Then I
make
pick one,
yeah.
and that can bring you down. Like that's a choose your own adventure, and there are some dark paths to go down that we can we can imagine ourselves into.
Well, it's making me think about how, you know, the evolutionary model of jealousy, like the Evo Psych model, would tell us that jealousy is natural, which I'm on board with the idea that sure, it's a feeling. Here it is. And they would say that it's evolved for a reason, and I'm with them. But there is this what is it evolved for is still up for debate in different theoretical models, and I tend to find more resonance and more evidence in my own research that jealousy is designed to keep me connected to the people who provide me with connection and belonging, like the
Yeah.
human need of
That human
belonging.
connection need.
And so when I think about that interpretation, right, the interpretation of the data that's coming in, I think, if I'm, say, seeing my partner, if I see you across the room and you're receiving someone's, full-bodied presence, like they're turned bodily facing you, shoulders aligned with yours, their face is lit up, your face is lit up, maybe there's some light arm touching or something. If I see that, the meaning I make out of it in the first few seconds is going to have a lot to do with what happens, whether I name it jealousy or not. The interpretation about what this means for my relational safety has a lot to do with how this plays out and how the night plays out as well.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that being able to spot jealousy is the feeling of jealousy. When I see you across the room and I get a full blown, like, whoa, I got all the jealousy markers. All my noticing just went to, yep, that's jealousy. I name it. For me, because I've done a bunch of work around steps 3 and 4 around unpacking my narrative, I walk myself into a place where I'm like, yep, I'm feeling jealous. What do I want to do with it? And now I'm in the position to decide whether I want to respond from that anxious attached strategy. And what I have found is you actually respond really strongly. If I go into an anxious, panicky fear, you respond really strongly. And my inner wounded children could absolutely get what they want. They could get you away from another person. They could get you to focus all your attention on me. They could interfere and interrupt a connection that you're having. Um, but that doesn't actually serve my larger purpose. That is not what I want for my relational reality, nor is it what I want for you. And so I have to actually do some things with my own nervous system to soothe myself so that I don't accidentally get us into a habit loop of,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to
Yeah. I was
use my
just,
attachment strategy and it's going to pull you over here. And now we're back in our tiny little pattern where I'm anxious and now you have to curtail your behavior. And now uh, neither one of us is actually big happy because we're not actually experiencing the expansivity that we want.
and that the sense of the interpretation of the situation and your inputs as fear, as producing fear, is a choice. I mean, it doesn't have to be a conscious choice, but
Well,
you're experiencing it. And I just heard you describe that, so parts of you are getting what they need or
well,
what they want.
can I push back a little bit there?
Sure,
I
of course.
I would say that once you've gotten to a spot where you can notice your jealousy early enough in the process to make yourself consciously aware of it, and you have de-shamed and destigmatized jealousy enough so that you can own it, now you might have a chance of making a conscious decision to use a different strategy rather than go into a childlike attachment strategy.
Thank you.
But
That's much better sentence construction, because I was headed to the idea that when you can get your nervous system calmed down to the point, or in a state where you can reclaim your agency about which strategies to use, But you outlined, the ways that you can get there.
Right. And that's I think that's important because we will often um be able to manage our nervous system pretty well and then still have yep, and then you could
And
still
then,
have a time when you're triggered beyond belief or where you're not able to hold yourself in the way that you want to. And at that point it's really important to think about, well, how are you going to process it? Let's say things don't go well. And by don't go well, I mean maybe I don't notice, like, oh, I actually have agency here, and I don't have to respond to my jealousy as if it is a full blown threat. I could instead respond as if, oh, I'm having feelings. But let's say I don't. Let's say I do not have a hold of myself and I go into panic and I interrupt your evening and I start building up this story. And now I'm making up this story and I'm roping you into the story. And now you're invested in my story too, even though you don't mean to be. If all of that happens, one of the questions that I think is important is who actually gets to decide whether this particular threat is big enough or real enough. Because when we're talking about jealousy, a lot of times we're talking about imagined threat. I mean, there is real threat. You might be having a real rational, like, yep, there is evidence that your partner is outside of the boundaries or is actively seeking to violate your explicit agreements. That's not what we're talking about here. Let's talk about when we are experiencing a hyper reaction to a situation that we have agreed to. This is cool. We're all good. How do we decide whether jealousy is like big enough or real enough to qualify for
yeah.
doing jealousy work, like,
Yep.
or even getting named? Because I see a lot of people be dismissive of their partner having jealousy, saying things like, well, that's just jealousy, so or you don't have anything to worry about,
Yeah. Right. That's, um,
which is missing the point of the panic response. The panic response, if I'm not able to soothe my nervous system and I'm in a panic response, I'm in a threat response. In that moment, like, the threat is real. The threat is real.
yeah.
Something can be imaginal and real.
Yep.
Have we talked about that enough on this podcast for me to just say that, or should I explain it?
You should explain that. Yeah.
Okay. Um, there are a lot of directions to come at this. We could go with like the whole, like, we're in the matrix theory, but that's not the angle I'm coming at it from. I'm just thinking about how, just like when you were a child and you could be in a world of your own, playing with your dolls or driving your Matchbox trucks or, uh, waving a stick as a sword through the air, just as that was entirely real to your psyche, you were in that scene. That's still happening now while you're a grown up. What is imagined is having a very real impact. And we have some interesting data. Like, there's data that says that shows that thinking about exercise can produce actual physiological changes in a non-moving body. So, I mean, brains are amazing.
Brains are amazing. I mean, how many people have woken up from a dream where somebody was mean to them, mad at that person?
Right.
Like,
It's
they weren't there,
right.
but it's real. There's an experience that carries beyond just the imaginal.
And I think this is important when we're talking about jealousy and survival fear, because if I'm doing a threat assessment at a very root level of my conscious or my unconscious awareness, like my limbic system is doing an assessment, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And it gets a hell no, you're not safe. If as my partner, if you say to me, that's not a real threat, you don't get to feel that way, it's just an ineffective strategy. I mean, we could talk about whether that's nice or not, but I want to be practical right now. That's
Not
just not an
effective.
effective
Mhm.
strategy for building relational connection, nor for actually dealing with the moment of jealousy panic. Like, while you're in the moment, it's just not terribly effective. So I will say some people will choose to just like bow out. They're like, nope, this is not my problem. I am just gonna like hands off. I'm gonna move away from this. And you get to set your boundaries about what you allow into your space. But if you are collaborating and you want to collaborate on this jealousy, then having having a process that you work through jealousy with can be helpful. One of the things I like to have with you in particular is a way to dialogue about our jealousy that is non pathologizing,
Yeah. Hmm.
where we talk about the jealousy. And I like to use personifying as the mode for that. I will talk about my jealousy as this creature, as this other that has sort of possessed me, and remember that that's not all I am, but that I want to express to you how
And
huge it feels.
yeah, and one of the ways that um, that collaboration works is I'm not over here judging the monster, judging that creature. It's just okay. That's which, by the way, the word monster doesn't evoke like a negative judgment for me. They're just critters like anybody else. So
You like monsters quite a lot.
I like monsters fine. I saw Monsters Inc. I mean, who doesn't love those monsters?
Oh, that's true. That's true. We did an episode on what if your monsters are
Hmm.
trying to help you.
Yeah,
Um, and the whole idea of monstrous. One of my colleagues, I went to graduate school with, uh, Tree is doing some interesting studies around the monsters of psyche right now. I'll
that's
ask Tree to
cool.
weigh in on the monsters here
Yeah.
soon. Um,
So yeah,
because
so
jealousy
I
definitely
let
constellates that monster energy for a
right.
lot of
And
us.
so if I let that monster be a morally neutral critter, then we can talk. Then we can go back and forth about how it's going. And
But if you get triggered in your own stuff because I experience jealousy and I start to tell you about it, and then you start to take it on as if you are the cause of my jealousy versus and this is the framing I like to use, it helps me. I am interpreting data. You happen to be the physical body that provided me that data, but I'm interpreting the data in here. I'm making meaning out of this, and from there, I can ask you to be a sacred witness to my jealousy without blaming you for it, and without asking you to change anything you're doing. And so this is where often I need time. I like if I am constellated in my jealousy, I may lack the time to to deal with it with this sort of giving it this sort of gravity. Being patient when jealousy arises is probably the number one skill.
because it in the kind of jealousy we're talking about is that survival fear that can really push us to move fast.
Yeah, it
And
does. That's what
it
it's supposed to.
takes, yeah, I mean, it's survival fear. It
Or
feels like
even the freeze response.
yeah,
It's this it takes over
yep,
instantaneously.
and,
Um,
finding ways to make some space and to
right.
not immediately respond, to the fear.
And so this might be a good time to talk about having a plan. If you are working with jealousy as one of the emotional components of your relationship, and let's say we're opening a relationship up, and so we're going to have areas of expansivity where previously exclusivity, or at least the fantasy of exclusivity, had protected me from needing to look right at and feel my jealousy. If I'm going to set that down, for me it's really helpful to remember that I'm probably going to need more time to process my feelings about jealousy. And that's not just with you. I also need to take it to my therapist. take it to my journal, take it to the groups I work with, and name it out loud and start working with jealousy as this really normal response that I'm having that used to mean one thing. My jealousy used to come up, and in the context of exclusive, monogamous behavior, I was taught to respond to my jealousy from a full blown panic mode. And now I've consciously decided to do something different. I'm going to have to rewire my neurology. I'm going to have to actually rewire my responses.
It's going to take some practice.
It's going to take practice, and I've got to take it out of this. I've got to take myself out of the idea that I have to know how to deal with it perfectly and give space to trying on new ways to behave and respond. And one of the things that I've done is given myself permission to just walk away. And so actively choosing a threat response, an attachment strategy that is not my go to, but choosing flight has been so beneficial for me. We've been at play parties before where I got constellated into my jealousy. I'm like, whew, I'm a disaster. And it's like brewing up, and I'm feeling all the stuff, and everything in me is telling me to go to you, interrupt whatever you're doing and get you away. And instead, I chose to do something else. So I chose intentionally to go outside, breathe cold air. It happened to be the last time it happened. It was a cold weather party. So I went outside and I breathed cold air. And within about 45 seconds, I was completely like I had short circuited that particular threat response. And it was, I mean, the cold air helped. That was regulating to my nervous system. I was also using nervous system regulation tools. And I chose something that disrupted the pattern. Radical discontinuity. Like, okay, I've been playing this game with jealousy for so long. What if I try something else? And I find myself able then, or what happened in the particular moment I'm remembering, one of the things that happened was a different part of me came online. Like an inner parental figure stepped forward, and I was like, I got you. He's not violating any agreements, and nothing bad's happened. You like this, in fact, won't you? And this part of me started talking through, like, how will you feel about this as it's recounted? Like when you're the next time you're having sex with him and you're talking about this story and you're retelling the story of what he's doing right now, how are you going to feel? Oh, you're going to feel really good. You're going to like that, right? Okay. So not all of you is panicked. Some parts of you are feeling other things, but they're not out front. They are
Yeah.
not the inner council members that are really out front running the show right now. So what if we access their wisdom?
So you stayed with the discomfort of that initial flush
Yeah.
long enough, and it doesn't sound like it was very long to um, to be able to shift it or to let it shift. It doesn't even sound like you really did all that much at first. Just
Mm,
allowed those other parts to start having their say.
right. And in this case, it was really important for me to break my habit because my habit has been to go to you. And we have a bunch of tools that make it pretty efficient to work through this stuff, but it's nice to have tools for myself.
Yeah. So
And
so
that
you
also interrupted the pattern in a way that leaves me with a lot more agency.
that is that's interesting. That reminds me of we've talked about being in fights. So we're in a sticky situation. We're stepping away from jealousy for a minute. We're people who have a conflict. We're working on it, and it's the same old conflict. We have this fight before. Do one small thing different. Pick one thing to do different. And I just heard you describe the same thing for the habitual patterns of jealousy. You
Yeah.
could do the same thing that you always do, and you'll most likely get the same result. If you want a different result, pick something small to do different. And you did.
And I like choosing one small thing. You're experimenting
Right.
here. You're experimenting with
Don't do too much. You won't know what did
what
the job.
actually worked, right?
Yeah.
But it when we're experimenting with new strategies for staying in connection, maintaining my sense of belonging while also caring for myself, I like making the container really small and the changes small. Um, it lets me know what works, but it also just gives me evidence that often it's not going to take a lot to evoke change. And honestly, a win for me in that moment might have been simply being able to slow down my system enough to come back to you and more in a gentle way say, you know what, I could use some more support. The next time you're free, could we take 20 minutes and just go be one to one, have some alone time? And that just that like opens up space. And it's it never ceases to amaze me how big a change I can get from a very small what feels like in description is a small amount of growth,
Yeah.
but it then amounts to big change because then I think about the trajectory of that particular night and how it went and how we both felt empowered to be who we actually wanted to be, and I felt like a good parent to my inner children as well as all the fun stuff we experienced. Like
It's a good
again,
feeling.
experiencing non-monogamy as a psychological growth lab, as experiencing it as my individuation journey, but I have to bring that all to conscious awareness,
Right. Yeah.
in order to really be proud of it and to be excited about it. Otherwise, it's kind of happening, but it might be happening under the surface, and I might never really notice, wow, look, I'm growing and I'm changing, and I actually can work with something even as huge as survival fear level jealousy. I can do it.
What a wonderful little skill to have. A little
Not a
magical thing
not a
to.
little skill. Not a little skill. That's a huge skill. So
Yeah.
for anybody out there who's thinking, "Okay, I experience jealousy to a degree that feels unworkable." Like my I am not going to be able to tolerate my partner doing certain things. What I want what I would want everybody to know is that it's not about jumping off the diving board that's, 30 feet over the pool. I,
Yeah.
I want you to sit on the side, dip your toes in, and experiment with how you can change your attitude toward your jealousy. How can you interact with your jealousy differently and start to make a little bit of space? Because a little bit of space becomes a big lever,
Yeah.
right? It becomes a big lever to move the bigger rocks of jealousy later.
Yep.
It's not a small thing. So
It
we're
isn't.
talking about
It has a enormous impact
right.
on our ability to interact with and work with jealousy.
So nervous system awareness, um, uh, giving yourself tools to have like clear rescue plan when jealousy shows up, understanding how to walk through the jealousy roadmap, especially those first 3 steps, understanding how to walk through it for yourself. And we have free guides for that, including some free worksheets to help you just walk through it, even in a moment of jealousy, like what's going on here. And then what I would wish for everybody, a sense of empowerment around like jealousy is your experience. And while I want you to feel ready and able to have conversations with your partners about how you work with it in your relationship and how you want that to go, I also want you to feel empowered to manage it and handle it and grow through it from where you are right now, because it is your emotional experience. So you are fully empowered to do that right now.
That's beautiful. Thank you for all that.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sparking this particular discussion. We talk to you all the time. It is absolutely imperative to me that we get to hear from you as well.
Yes, please.
So, we'd love to invite you to join us. Join Ken and I. We're holding monthly Ask Me Anythings. You can show up, bring your questions from podcast episodes, from your relationships, bring questions about non monogamy, about individuation, about relationship skills. We would love to share space with you. We're hosting these AMAs free of charge for our podcast listeners. You are the Playing with Fire community, and it matters a ton to us that we connect with you directly. So
Oh,
go,
I would so love to hear your questions and it'd be so awesome.
yeah. Go to joliehamilton.com/AMA and you'll find a way to sign up real quick and get an invitation to join us in a small group where we're going to get together and talk about all things non monogamy, individuation, and relationships.